Tonight, more than 1 million students and their parents face another week of uncertainty. Ontario education workers remain defiant and off the job as parents prepare for at-home learning again.
Tomorrow is going to be a very tough day for us.
The final pitch ahead of a pivotal vote in the U.S.
That's what America stands for.
We're not going to let it happen again.
As Americans prepare for the midterm elections, we set the stage in a crucial battleground.
It makes me feel very anxious and disappointed.
And he's Canada's coach of the World Cup.
It's Canada being back on the biggest stage in world football, world sport.
His hopes for his team and the fans watching back home.
This is The National with Ian Hanomansing.
Tonight, parents across Ontario are being warned to make childcare plans. With no resolution in a contract dispute involving education workers, many schools will remain closed tomorrow. After a weekend of rallies and legal wrangling, it's still not clear when schools could reopen. That's because the province and the union representing the workers appear to be no closer to an agreement. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson walks us through where things stand tonight and what it all means for the more than 1 million students and their families caught in the middle.
Okay, ready? We're going to put your helmet on, okay?
Miley's Tamamegi's youngest child, who is not in school yet, is the only family member whose life this week will unfold as normal.
So I guess I feel very sad for the children. I feel very sad for the education workers.
One of Tamamegi's other kids has autism. The family says his educational assistant at school is key to keeping him happy and progressing. Still,
we can't just put him into a pop-up strike camp. We can't because he needs support. So tomorrow is going to be a very tough day for us.
Many of Ontario's close to 2 million school kids and their families are facing an uncertain week. Tens of thousands of educational assistants, early childhood educators, janitors walked off the job Friday after the province passed legislation imposing a contract and banning their right to strike. Many school boards decided that without the workers, they have to close their doors until the dispute is resolved, leaving many families in limbo.
Just the uncertainty, the not knowing what's happening is really kind of, it creates anxiety, of course.
As workers and their supporters rallied this weekend, the Ontario government and the union representing the workers were locked in an argument at the Ontario Labour Relations Board about whether this strike is legal, about whether it's a strike or a political protest, and to an extent about the very legitimacy of the notwithstanding clause invoked by the Ontario government.
This is clearly a major development that everyone, involved in labor and industrial relations is concerned about, because there is one other instance in which a government invoked a notwithstanding clause to impose an agreement. That was in 1986.
So the Labour Board hearing is over, but we still don't have a decision, though we do know what the union's going to do.
That's right, Ian. The union had said that no matter what the decision is, they're going to continue with their protest starting tomorrow for as long as it takes. That means even if they are in fact fined.
And so for parents throughout Ontario, what are the school plans?
I think it's the dreaded ritual from the pandemic of picking up those laptops for your kids. And another interesting sidebar that I've seen, some teachers on Twitter are expressing discomfort with teaching virtually, saying that they feel like they're almost crossing a virtual picket line and acting against the interests of their colleagues.
All right, and we await the Labour Board hearing. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
World leaders and delegates are now gathering in Egypt as the UN Climate Change Conference gets underway. As Chris Brown shows us, the two-week summit kicked off today with an agreement, but also a grim warning.
The world has arrived in Egypt's desert to take another crack at preventing the planet from overheating. Just down the highway, there's a modest but important example of what's at stake. The Sinai's bleakness is broken at the water's edge by a rare cluster of mangroves here. The saltwater-resistant trees play an oversized role fighting climate change, says this conservationist.
One of the most important things to mitigate is to increase mangrove trees which sequester carbon dioxide. It's said that it is sequester 4 times the tropical forests of carbon dioxide.
A bit hotter or drier, and these plants on the edge of the Red Sea might all be gone. And if they die, all of the CO2 they've sucked out of the air over their lifetime will be released.
So conserving the mangrove is much more important even than restoring what has been destroyed of it.
But the summit began with grim news that keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees is now unlikely. So developing nations have successfully added discussions over compensation for past climate damage to the COP27 talks.
I particularly welcome the agreement of the parties to include a new agenda item on funding arrangements to respond to loss and damage.
That's going to be a hard sell, as many wealthy countries, including Canada, worry the sky's the limit with potential claims. Instead, their preference is to focus on helping countries mitigate and adapt now.
Most of the major countries, including across Europe and the US, don't even have a domestic policy on how to compensate or manage climate damage at home, let alone abroad.
African nations contribute just 4% of the world's greenhouse gases, but stand to be hurt hardest by climate change through droughts, floods, and a drop in food production. Egypt's government appears eager to demonstrate that it has the diplomatic clout needed to secure an agreement that benefits the whole continent. Civil society groups, though, see a different agenda that is trying to greenwash a terrible record on human rights and political freedoms. Chris Brown, CBC News in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt.
The cleanup is underway in parts of Western Canada after a stormy weekend with everything from damaging winds to freezing rain and snow. That was in southern Saskatchewan today, day 2 of a storm known as an Alberta Clipper that brought strong winds and snow. In some areas near Regina, visibility was so bad roads were closed, and the RCMP was warning people to reconsider travel plans. And in southwestern British Columbia, the cleanup continued today after a powerful windstorm downed trees and power lines. In some areas, it caused major damage.
I heard a crack and a whooping sound. So I looked out the window to find this giant tree had come down and crushed our shed.
BC Hydro said the storm knocked out power to more than 300,000 customers. Most have gotten power back. Provincial and territorial health ministers will meet face-to-face tomorrow in Vancouver alongside their federal counterpart. They'll be focused on tackling the growing crisis in the Canadian healthcare system and, as Marina von Stackelberg tells us, the cost of fixing it.
Let's make a house.
This toddler has been waiting years for routine urinary tract surgery.
And we have no timeline, no options, nothing. It's really, really frustrating.
In Quebec, an elderly patient died after not being seen for 16 hours.
S'il avait été vu plus rapidement, il serait encore en vie, c'est sûr.
Just some of the stories from Canada's healthcare system in the last few weeks alone. The provinces are responsible for providing healthcare, but they partially rely on federal dollars to do it. A fight over how much Ottawa should pay continues to build, one that has gotten so heated, Canada's premiers launched an advertising campaign about it.
But we need the federal government to restore funding now, to keep our systems strong.
The provinces want Ottawa to increase its share of healthcare costs from 22% up to 35%. But they don't believe the federal government is interested in a real conversation about it, says BC's health minister in an interview on Rosemary Barton Live.
The federal government has not been willing to do the work to come to the table and to sit down, prime ministers and premier, and talk about, I think, one of the central issues facing the country. And so that's disappointing.
Ottawa promised to boost the amount of money it gave once the pandemic was over. It comes through the Canada Health Transfer, the single largest chunk of money from the federal government to the provinces. They're expected to receive a total of $45 billion this year. This summer, Ottawa injected an extra $2 billion.
We were going to focus next week on the results that we want jointly to achieve.
Ottawa says what the provinces do with money it sends them needs to be tied to tangible and concrete improvements to Canada's healthcare system. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
There is concern about the low uptake of COVID vaccines for kids under 5. Vaccination rates haven't caught up to other age groups. And as Julia Wong shows us, with winter fast approaching, experts hope that can change.
It's cold, hey?
Alyssa Patterson says it was never a question to get 2-year-old Avery vaccinated against COVID-19.
We always knew that we were going to do it. We've gotten her all of her other vaccines, and I follow a lot of scientists online who all have vaccinated their children.
But little Avery is a bit of a rarity. Recent numbers from the Public Health Agency of Canada show 6.5% of kids under 5 have 1 dose of vaccine, 1% have 2 doses.
Coverage for COVID vaccine for kids under 5 is quite strikingly low.
Shannon McDonald studies immunization policy and practice. She says research shows a parent's intention to vaccinate changes based on the age of their child.
We've seen that with COVID vaccines, that what you're willing to do with a 12-year-old is different than a 5-year-old, different than a 2-year-old. So it's partly around a parental choice thing.
Young kids may have a lower risk of serious illness, but doctors say COVID-19 can be random.
It's hard to predict which ones are going to require hospitalization, which ones might be more complicated, as most of the kids who are hospitalized with Omicron actually don't have an underlying risk factor.
This fall, there have been soaring numbers of kids getting respiratory viruses. Doctors say this youngest age group could use the extra line of defense, especially as people move indoors during the cold.
So I think that's our greatest concern, is that if there is another variant, will we be ready, and will our pediatric population be protected in as adequate a way as we can?
I mean, every parent just wants to protect their child, and everyone's doing the best they can and making the decisions they feel are right for them and their family, and that's all they can do.
Experts say sharing information about vaccine safety and effectiveness could help boost uptake. They also say it comes down to relationships between parents and their physicians and the trust between them. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
WestJet is warning passengers there could still be days of flight disruptions after a system-wide data problem forced the cancellation of hundreds of flights this weekend.
We're working as hard as we can to get everybody to the destination they wanted to go, but the impact has been and actually still is severe.
It all started around noon Saturday in Calgary when an air conditioner failed in WestJet's main data room. That caused a 9-hour system shutdown. So even though things were fully up and running this morning, many aircraft were simply in the wrong place, and clearing that backlog remains a big task. CBC News has learned the federal government has been advised to stop advertising on Twitter until it's clear how massive layoffs will affect the way content is moderated. The government's main ad agency warns its client's brand could be damaged by fake or offensive comments. And the New York Times is reporting Twitter will now delay that plan to start charging an $8 monthly fee for the blue check that verifies accounts of well-known people. New owner Elon Musk began advertising the change on Saturday, but concerns were raised that changing the system ahead of the U.S. midterm election on Tuesday could invite mass disinformation. There are growing calls tonight for an apology from Montreal police. This after a Montreal man said he was stopped and handcuffed walking to his own car. As Rowan Kennedy shows us, what happens next was caught on video.
Is it because I'm black, says Bryce Dosa, outraged after police stopped him last week. He was walking to his car in a Montreal Mall parking lot when plain-clothed officers handcuffed him. Police said they thought his car was stolen after seeing marks around the keyhole. CBC News has confirmed the car is new and there are no marks. You handcuffed me and you don't even have the keys, he says. Police verified it was his vehicle, but Doza says they didn't have the key to release him. More officers arrived 15 minutes later, and the handcuffs were removed.
I feel traumatized. I feel that I've been humiliated. And this is a discrimination.
Dosa came here 3 years ago from Benin and works as an orderly.
I'm scared of police now because they can do anything. I don't trust the police anymore.
Outrage on social media over the now viral video spread quickly, and it coincided with a forum on racial profiling here in Montreal this weekend. The organizers are calling for Montreal police to apologize.
You need grounds, reasonable suspicion, to arrest someone. Did they have any?
Our own premier, Mr. François Legault, as well as the entire CAQ government, need to recognize that systemic racism exists.
Following calls by Quebec government ministers on social media, Montreal's police department has opened an administrative investigation to shed light on the events. The city councillor responsible for public security calls the video troubling. Alain Vaillancourt says events like these affect people's trust in police.
No one says sorry to me. No one says sorry.
Dosa says he's filed a complaint with Montreal police and is not ruling out taking legal action. Rowan Kennedy, CBC News, Montreal.
In what could signal a shift in hockey culture, a decision by the Boston Bruins to sign a controversial player is creating a backlash in the league. The NHL commissioner called Mitchell Miller's behavior as a teenager reprehensible and says he's not eligible to play. And as Georgie Smythe explains, even Bruins players are openly criticizing their own team's decision.
On the power play.
The Bruins couldn't hold back the Leafs taking a 2-1 loss on Saturday. They couldn't hold back their feelings either on newly signed defenseman Mitchell Miller.
A tough pill to swallow. I think we had a lot of concerns, and this kid will have to, answer for those.
As a 14-year-old, Miller pleaded guilty to assaulting a black classmate with disabilities, including with racial insults, physical violence, and forcing him to eat candy that had been wiped across a bathroom urinal.
The next selection in the 4th round of the 2020.
In the 2020 NHL draft, Miller was picked by the Arizona Coyotes, then dropped over concerns about his conviction.
Down to Miller. Miller shoots, score!
He went on to become a star player in the USHL. The Bruins didn't consult the league before picking him up, according to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman.
He's not coming into the NHL. He's not eligible at this point to come into the NHL. I can't tell you that he'll ever be eligible to come into the NHL.
Fellow Bruins are openly worried about giving Miller a second chance.
If it's the same 14-year-old that would be walking into this locker room, he wouldn't be accepted and wanted and welcomed in this locker room, to be honest with you.
And keeping Miller on could send the wrong message to fans.
Second chances should be earned and not given. And I'm not sure we've heard the steps that have been taken to change the person that Mr. Miller was when he was a youngster. Well, you can't push the slogan, hockey is for everyone, but then accept people who don't live that, breathe that.
Mitchell Miller, hat trick!
Miller, now 20 years old, apologized to all 31 teams when he was first drafted, but his status in an NHL looking to shift its culture is now in doubt. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
And a late development to this story, the Boston Bruins just announcing they are going to part ways with Miller. Backstreet Boys singer Nick Carter is speaking out about the death of his younger brother, Aaron.
I guess somewhere along I lost my head. Then I jumped on the table, this is what I said. People all around, you got to.
Aaron was best known for his music career in the early 2000s. He was an actor too. As he got older, he made headlines for struggles with substance abuse and mental health. On Instagram, Nick wrote, "Even though my brother and I have had a complicated relationship, my love for him has never ever faded. Now you can finally have the peace you could never find here on earth." Aaron Carter was found dead Saturday in his home in California. He was just 34 years old. An Ontario family is speaking out about tenants who refuse to pay and refuse to leave.
He literally laughed on my face.
Why there's little they can do today, and
President Donald J. Trump.
He may not be on the ballot, but Trump is playing a major role in the U.S. midterms.
I want Putin to interfere with the election and bring Trump back again.
Plus,
Buchanan!
I speak with the coach who put Canada's men's soccer team on the world stage.
I do wake up in cold sweats.
We're back in 2. An Ontario man says a provincial tribunal has put his family in an impossible situation. They've been forced to live in their basement because he can't get rid of delinquent tenants. As Erica Johnson and our Go Public team discovered, a backlog of cases have become a nationwide problem.
That was my daughter's room.
Hassan Khan, his wife and 3 children used to live on the main floor of their house. But for the past 6 months, they've been in the basement.
Yeah, even the mattresses, it's like one of them is thicker than the other one.
Tenants they rented their house to during a trip to India have refused to leave since May and no longer pay the $2,400 rent.
Yeah, thank you.
Go Public asked Khan's tenants for answers.
He wants you guys to leave now. Why won't you do that?
Next coming February, we will leave.
Endless excuses and no rent are taking a toll. Khan's filed a complaint with the LTB, Ontario's Landlord and Tenant Board, to get his renters evicted, but says that didn't bother them.
He literally laughed on my face. It's gonna take at least 6, 7, 8 months. Go to LTB, do whatever you want. So that was his words.
The case backlog's the result of the tribunal temporarily shutting down in the pandemic and the Ontario government freezing eviction orders. Wait times for hearings between property owners and tenants are growing at dispute tribunals across the country.
You're pretty much at their mercy. When they get to your application, they get to your application, and definitely government has heard from us in terms of how long that's been taking.
Our request for an interview at Ontario's Landlord and Tenant Board was declined.
We've been trying for weeks to get someone from the tribunal to talk to us. There's no one available?
I understand that, and unfortunately.
The Ontario government says it's working to cut the long list of cases, but says that takes time. As for Khan, 4 months after applying for a hearing, he's still waiting for a date.
He's waiting for something else, too. November's rent. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
If you have a tip for the Go Public team to investigate, send an email to gopublic@cbc.ca. The U.S. showdown for control of Congress is playing out in Pennsylvania.
I will be the 51st vote in D.C.
I will bring change to Washington.
And on the ballot, a fight for democracy. And a little later on the show, India's famous rickshaws are going green. The U.S. midterm elections are just 2 days away. Both the current Democratic president and the former Republican one out tonight on the campaign trail for this critical final stretch.
We all know it in our bones that our democracy is at risk. You can't only love the country when you win.
If we don't start winning these elections and winning them big and fairly, we're going to end up being a communist, not so, a communist country, because that's where they're taking it.
Control of the U.S. Senate could come down to the outcome in one state, Pennsylvania. Voters there sending either Democrat John Herdman or Republican Mehmet Oz to Washington. And both parties are portraying the stakes as historic. Katie Simpson is in Pittsburgh tonight. And Katie, give us a sense of just how important Pennsylvania is right now.
The current president, Joe Biden, and two former presidents, Donald Trump and Barack Obama, all campaigned in this state over the weekend. To give you a sense of just how close this race is, control of the U.S. Senate is on the line, but something potentially even more important than that looms over this vote. It's a frantic final sprint in a key race to control the U.S. Senate. Democrat John Fetterman's slight lead over Republican TV personality Dr. Mehmet Oz continues to narrow.
Thank you.
And while Fetterman's supporters are enthusiastic, they're also nervous.
I will be the 51st vote in D.C.
The result of this contest and others in this midterm vote, from their perspective, is about more than just electing people to office. All of it is overshadowed by what they see as an existential threat.
Making up stories about stolen elections, scaring the bejeebies out of people. It makes me feel very, very anxious and disappointed.
Outrage over the violence that followed the 2020 election changed little about the overall tone of U.S. politics. If anything, it's more charged. Threats against lawmakers have surged, and trust in democratic institutions is eroding. So much of it fueled by conspiracy theories and lies. The big lie that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump looms large in Pennsylvania. More than half of the Republican candidates running in this state in this election cycle have either supported the lie or cast doubt about the election results. And this vote, this midterm vote, will be the first and most significant test of how electoral systems stand up to that big lie.
And we saw what happens when seeds of doubt are sown. We saw a violent, deadly attack on our nation's capital on the 6th of January.
Representative Joanne McClinton is the leader of the Democrats in the Pennsylvania State House.
We have to tell people the truth, and most importantly, the folks who are perpetuating the nonsense, the madness, even suggesting that there are irregularities, they must stop it.
The forces behind 2020 fraud claims show no signs of backing down, especially since the claims still help draw thousands of people to rallies.
There wasn't a free, fair election in the United States, by far. And the legislation people do not want to look into that at all. They turn their head the other way. They know damn well that this country and this election was stolen in 2020.
Conspiracy theories about January 6th are used to dismiss criticism.
I do think that there was infiltrated too. There is Black Lives Matter, there's Antifa, and I saw about 20 people all walk in with a freshly worn MAGA hat, and I don't think they were one of us.
Trump greatness already won the election. Why do we have to wait?
And even though so much of this hinges on election fraud claims, some are advocating for it.
If Russian collusion to make President Trump won the 2016, I wanted him to do it again. I want Putin to interfere with the election and bring Trump back again.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 45th President of the United States, President Donald J. Trump.
Donald Trump is harnessing this energy to galvanize his base ahead of Tuesday's vote.
They said Trump was 100% right. The election was rigged and stolen, and we're not going to let it happen again.
Republicans, including Senate hopeful Dr. Oz, accept glowing endorsements. And while he's not considered a hardcore election denier himself, he's comfortable sharing the same stage with one and supports further investigation of the 2020 vote.
I will bring change to Washington so they treat us the way we deserve. You all in?
Though in his own race, he's promising to accept the election results, whatever the outcome.
And if they vote for you, Oz, you can't lose.
But it may not matter if the leader of this movement doesn't, since this base of support listens to him.
Katie, Democrats and some Republicans are campaigning against election deniers, but is that message getting any traction?
Well, that's going to be the big question. Democrats have focused so much of their campaign on this argument. There is one thing that could really blow them out of the water, and that is the cost of living. Parents in this country are making choices between filling their gas tanks and going to work and feeding their children. And when that is the situation, it does not bode well for the party in power. Republicans are arguing that life was less expensive under the previous Republican administration, and that could be the most powerful argument that wins out over this vote. Ian.
Thanks, Katie. And we'll bring you special coverage of the midterms Tuesday night, including all of the results as they come in and what they mean for Canada's relationship with the United States. You can catch it all starting at 8 p.m. Eastern on CBC News Network and CBC Gem. Coverage goes all night long. And of course, here on the National on CBC Television at 10 p.m. local, 10:30 in Newfoundland. Canada's men's soccer team has done what many thought would never happen again. The World Cup awaits, and in big part, it's thanks to this man.
People keep mugging us off, saying I'm like Ted Lasso, so I won't watch it.
Team Canada coach John Herdman tells me his game plan next.
This is concerning. Alphonso Davies.
I'm feeling for him. You can see he's got a hamstring injury.
Team Canada's star player limped off the field in Germany Saturday, where he plays for Bayern Munich. Alphonso Davies will be out for the club's next 2 games because of a hamstring injury, but the team revealed today it is just a strain and said his participation in the World Cup later this month is, quote, not at risk. That is a huge relief for Canadian soccer fans as well as the national team and their coach, John Herdman. I spoke to Herdman about the World Cup before Davies' injury, but as you'll hear, it's not the first time the team has had to deal with a setback for their star player. John, I got 3 questions for you. Have fun with them. Your favorite sports movie?
Youngblood.
Really? With Rob Lowe?
Yeah, it was one of my favorites.
We're in this together. You're a team, a family.
Wow, I was not expecting that. Of all the soccer players in the world, not including any you've coached, who you feel is the absolute best?
Paul Gascoigne, because he's from Newcastle.
Ted Lasso or Wrexham FC?
Oh, I've never watched Ted Lasso because
How's that possible?
Because people keep mugging us off saying I'm like Ted Lasso, so I won't watch it. No, Wrexham FC's been brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Hey, listen, we believe that Ryan Reynolds might watch the CBC once in a while. Any advice for him?
Get into coaching. I think he's got a career ahead of him.
Well, let's learn a little bit more about John.
From obscurity to unforgettable, this...
Overcoming the odds. That's the story of Canadian soccer these days, and it's not a bad way to describe John Herdman. Though he never played at the elite levels, that's where he wanted to coach. So Herdman left his home in England to work with New Zealand's national women's team. Then Canada came calling.
It's all changed. A new coach in John Herdman.
He guided the women to back-to-back Olympic medals and laid the foundation for this.
To win it for Canada! Canada gold!
He took over the men's team in 2018, then ranked 94th in the world. Now they're headed to the World Cup. So here we are, just weeks away from the World Cup, you know, the biggest games for Canadian men's soccer in, 36 years? Are you getting much sleep?
Yeah, I get sleep. I'm pretty normal that way. But I do wake up in cold sweats thinking about Kevin De Bruyne or Romelu Lukaku. You know, there is that reality check that, you know, we're going up against some giants in world football here, and it's just not a place Canada's been for a long time. So a lot of excitement at the opportunity, but you've also got that little nagging feeling in the back of your mind that this is going to be tough.
We're going to talk a lot more about the World Cup in a sec, but I want to talk about you for a moment. You know, it's quite a journey from England to New Zealand to coming to Canada and guiding the women's national soccer team to the podium at the Olympics, and then switching over to the men's team. And as I understand it, you felt you had to leave England to build the credibility as an elite coach. Tell me about that.
I think, you know, leaving England was multifaceted reasons. You were working in a professional football academy, and you could sense that the career pathway was limited unless you played at the highest level at that time. So for me, it was, you're gonna have to adapt or get stuck in a rut. So, you know, moving to New Zealand was a big risk at the time, but we loved it. Best decision me and my wife have ever made. It was 10 years of massive growth as a coach, so many opportunities with their commitment to coaches and coach development in New Zealand, probably one of the best in the world at developing people, which I think created the foundation I needed to come to a place like Canada, where, to be fair, women's football, there was big expectation.
You go from the women's national team, which you helped lift up to being one of the elite teams in the world, to the men's national team, and you have said it was not easy at the beginning.
We took some heat. There was a lot of misogyny around whether a women's coach could coach men and handle the locker room, but over the time I think we've slowly proven people wrong, and more importantly just brought this dream to the country that they've been waiting for.
Was it a challenge for you at all as somebody who's not from Canada, to try to instill in this team the sense of how important it is to represent Canada? Like, how do you sell that to them?
I think the players want to represent Canada. What I could sense with the players in moving over is they'd never really been asked those questions. Why? You know, why do you wear that shirt? And then creating a commonality to, you know, why we're going to band together and fight together. And I think over time, every camp, we got more clearer on what that purpose was. We were able to establish a clear code of the shirt that it was clear the environments previous had been too permissive. You know, the culture was supportive but not demanding enough. And the players weren't holding each other accountable. And I think then belief comes when you start achieving some of the things that you set out to achieve. We were setting, you know, internal records every game, every year. And when you're achieving those things, this belief starts to grow, which then cements the purpose, and the collectivity comes, which they call their brotherhood.
And then there are the inevitable setbacks along the way. Alphonso Davies, certainly, you know, maybe your best player, certainly maybe the best known, had an inflammation of the heart, missed a game a year ago, was it now? And then got kicked in the head during a collision. I mean, when you heard that news, this was in club play when he was in Munich, how did you react?
I mean, that whole qualification campaign, you know, when we got the news Davies would miss 7 of 14 games, I think many people thought Canada's best shot of qualifying had now gone. But what was crazy about that was that January window. It was our toughest window. We had to travel to Honduras, back to Canada, then to El Salvador. We won all 3 of them games, and there was something about him not being there that brought the best out of everyone else. And we have a next man up philosophy in this team, and I think everyone's bought into that.
And then the pay dispute for the team, which also led to, the cancellation, I think, of a game. You're in a tough position as the coach. You work for Canada Soccer. Your players are having a dispute with Canada Soccer. How did you handle that?
It was difficult. Look, it's a situation you don't want to be in as a coach. You understand and respect where the players are coming from. They believe strong in, you know, the work that had been put in, a body of work over a period of time. They've been putting their careers on the line. They'd left their families behind. They'd travelled in COVID conditions. They'd gone to countries that were deemed unsafe. So you understood it, because I was there in the fight with them. You can empathise, and on the same line, you've got Canada Soccer that haven't been to a World Cup for 36 years. You've got a team that's growing exponentially on the field, and an organisation that's trying to adapt to those realities. I think you have to be a humanist. You've got to see both sides and understand, and then walk that fine line, because it took a long time to build trust with these players, a long time, and that can dissipate in seconds. So it was a really tough moment, and you know, I thank Canada Soccer for not putting me in those positions where you could have lost the trust of the players.
What is success? What does success look like for you here for the men's team?
I think success is that these men enjoy this experience and the country enjoy it. I think it's not being too high, not being too low around this whole experience. Take it for what it is. It's Canada being back on the biggest stage in world football, world sport. It's about small steps. It's about scoring our first goal. I mean, that would be a huge success, to know this country get a chance to celebrate a goal, keeping a clean sheet, a shutout, getting a first result, getting a first win, getting out of the group stage, you know, beating one of the biggest teams. I mean, these are all sort of pioneering moments. So success will be to have at least one of them, and then push to as many as we can capture in this moment.
I don't know if it's most of the people watching, but a lot of them know exactly what's happening with your team. But we have a lot of people in Canada who don't know a lot about soccer, but suddenly will become really interested in the men's national team. What should they be looking for at the World Cup?
I think they should be looking to enjoy being back, putting away, you know, that Italian jersey or Portuguese jersey or whatever jersey they used to have to wear. You know, they live in this country now, and hopefully they can pull on a Canada shirt with pride, and that key word is pride. You know, we're going up against perennial contenders in Croatia, Belgium, the #2 team in the world, real giants. And for many Canadians, that's the story they want to get behind. So we'll be an underdog story, and we're hoping that you can feel that pride when you watch our team. And you can pull on that red jersey for the first time in a long time.
Well, Canada will be watching, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Easy to get excited listening to him, and it'll be easy to get excited when you hear our interview with Alphonso Davies. That's coming up in probably 2 weeks' time. After the break, an emotional journey from Afghanistan to Canada.
He survived from Taliban. He is now with his family.
A tearful reunion, a year in the making, in our moment. As we told you earlier, world leaders and their delegates are arriving in Egypt to grapple with climate change, along with environmentalists and scientists who say we're not moving fast enough. But change is happening on a smaller scale too. Tonight, Salima Shivji shows us how a grassroots green initiative, the electric rickshaw, is taking off on its own.
In the jumble of New Delhi traffic, chaos is a given. And so are these electric rickshaws jockeying for space, zooming from one spot to the next. It's an EV revolution, some say, that's overtaken India's capital and several other northern states. But for Suman, who's been driving an e-rickshaw taxi for 3 years, it's about power. An opportunity to make her own living, be her own boss. At first, my husband didn't want me to, but I fought to do this, she says. I wanted to give my 4 daughters a better life than I had. And so she plies the road, part of an army of clean energy entrepreneurs, driving a key pillar, the shift towards electric vehicles in India's fight against climate change and crippling air pollution. She has to pause for several hours a day to jumpstart her battery. A pit stop at this roadside charging station straddling a ditch that services a dozen e-rickshaws at a time, with infrastructure that's dubious at best. Still, it does the trick. Ishak Pradhan runs the rickety charging station. He keeps seeing new drivers turn up, lured by the electric three-wheeler's low maintenance and low price. Business has doubled here, he says, but so have my costs.
The number of e-rickshaws like this one navigating the roads in India is officially pushing some 2 million, but their rise in popularity and rapid spread has been unregulated and a little messy. So the number is likely much higher, and that's left industry and government playing catch-up.
The promotion of electric cars, scooters, and three-wheelers has now been turbocharged. Auto manufacturers are recognizing the organic spread of the clean vehicles is something that can be harnessed, this salesman says.
The adoption rate is so high that the future of electric in India is really good. Everyone is adopting. The running cost of the vehicle is very low, and also it is emission-free. So all these things combined, it makes a very good, value case for them.
The government is also betting on that good value to get the country closer to its net zero goals. It's cut taxes on EVs and offers subsidies to buyers and to companies making batteries and building charging stations. India's political class is fully aware the electric push here is powered not by cars, but by scooters and rickshaws. A blueprint for other developing countries, says this expert.
If you are looking to embark on a mobility transition, it's probably better and wiser to look at what's the path of least resistance, and which means don't necessarily start at four-wheelers, start at the cheaper end of the spectrum.
But as the idea catches on and competition grows fierce, there's an unintended consequence for drivers like Suma. It used to be better, but now the work has dried up, she says, with so many more e-rickshaws on the road. The pain of success of a humble, homegrown solution ready to chart a low-carbon future. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Delhi.
A long-awaited hug between a father and his daughter, seeing each other for the first time in more than a year. Farhang Nassar was separated from her father after she fled Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. Her dad stayed behind until now. Their emotional reunion is our moment.
He's finally here. I'm really happy, and right now I cannot put the feelings into the words to say, but I'm really happy. Now I got everything in my life. He's my hero. He's the best, and he survived from Taliban. He is now with his family. It has been about 1 year and 1 month. It was really hard without my dad, without his words to say like, "Good night, my princess, you're my everything." And so it was about 1 year that I couldn't hear these words from him. I want the government of Canada to bring him to me, and they made it happen. Thank you so much. This tonight is gonna be the best night in my life again.
So many refugee stories in Canada, and so often they're filled with trauma. So it was nice that the family allowed us to have a peek inside of a very sweet reunion like that. That is the National for November the 6th. Good night.